Thank you. Thanks, Denise. And thank you so much to Gallery Nucleus, Denise and Ben, just for all their hard work and warm invitation to do this panel event and giving us a chance to all talk with you today and to talk with each other. It's such a treat, especially when we're all, wherever we are, kind of stuck in our little bubbles. And I want to first introduce the panel, and then I'll say very brief words about why there's a new addition to this book. But I definitely want to make sure you know who this cool panel is that we're going to be talking with, and you're going to be having questions as well for this panel. So I am going to share my screen. If I'm able to do so. This looks promising. Okay. And this is where you get to see which picture I chose for each panelist. Okay. So you guys can see my screen? Awesome, thanks. So our first panelist is Koyalee Chanda, and I also want to say I organized the panelists in alphabetical order because they're all equal in my mind and just wonderful superstars, and alphabetical is the fairest way to do it. So we're starting with Koyalee Chanda, and she's got a really incredible background. She's a children's media creative / producer / director / development executive. There's not enough slashes to really do justice to her career. She's a writer as well. She's helmed projects at Nick, HBO Kids and Family, Universal Kids, PBS Kids, Apple, Netflix, more than we can list, definitely Sesame Workshop as well. And she's currently the VP of Kids and Animation at Hello Sunshine, which is Reese Witherspoon's media company. So breaking new ground, with a new company, and can't wait to hear more about that. And she's also the voice of Magenta from Blue's Clues, which is why I chose that little puppy with glasses on the bottom. So awesome to have you here, Koyalee. And you're welcome, yay. And our next panelist is Joanna Davidovich. She's an in-demand animation artist, an incredible freelancer working from home these days for clients such as Hasbro, Cartoon Network, Warner Brothers Animation. She's recently finished her second children's book, and she's currently sharing tips, thoughts, and work on YouTube. I don't know where she finds the time to do that, but you should definitely seek out her YouTube channel. It's got opinion pieces, it has tutorials, it has live streams. It's really just one of the warmest, most welcoming places to spend some time, as an animation person. And you should really check it out. And that she's devotes a good portion of time to keeping that going is really commendable. So super happy to have Joanna here, all the way from Atlanta. And then Mike Hollingsworth, someone I've only known, for a relatively short period of time, but he and I were both at the Pixelotl Festival in Mexico in 2019, September. Although we didn't meet then, but I'm glad I met him since then. He's the former supervising director and co-executive producer of a show you might have heard of, BoJack Horseman. And he's the current exec producer of Netflix upcoming series, Inside Job. That's not the little insects and snail on the bottom. That's from a short he did with Nick Digital, some years back. And it's, again, I feel like just like Koyalee and Joanna, there's not enough room to really do justice to everyone's background here, but I'm just trying to distill it down. I know Mike has a really rich history, including stand-up comedy, which I'm sure he'll talk about. So welcome, Mike. And then last but not least, Donna Lee, another artist I had the pleasure of meeting. We actually did meet and have breakfast in Pixelotl in September 2019. She was from Disney, I was from Disney, but it's fun. Sometimes you have to go to another country to meet a colleague, even when it's working for the same media company you work at. She's a former story artist at some of the best studios we can name, Walt Disney Animation Studios, where she worked on a film you might have heard of, Frozen 2, DreamWorks, Paramount Pictures, and Titmouse. And she's currently a story artist at Sony Pictures Animation. So welcome, Donna. Cool, so I'm gonna stop sharing, and then I have questions for each of the panelists, and I have some questions for all the panelists, but that I wanna just kind of do a round robin style on, and we're gonna make room for your questions, as we said. But I just wanna say a few words about why an updated version of this book. So here's the book. Denise held it up, so I guess I should too, just to really prove it's real. In 2004, I wrote everyone's holding up their copy, or a couple of people. In 2004, I wrote the I started writing the first draft of the original edition. So think about 2004 for a moment. Let's go back in time. Selby was president. No, we don't care about that right now. So in 2004, right, there's no, Netflix is really not a viable streaming platform yet the way it became shortly after. You don't have social media like we do today, right? You don't have, Instagram and Facebook. You don't have things like the Me Too movement yet. Oscars So White, things that are bringing social change, to our world and to media. And you don't have virtual studios were really not viable yet. They were probably just on the cusp of doing that. I think my first virtual studio project was 2007, where you could really just forego the brick and mortar studio and set up in your apartment, and almost like a precursor for today's pandemic. So it was a really different world. And the book was locked in that time. And although at the time in 2004 to 2005, when I wrote it, I tried to be as diverse as I could, but my own personal experiences were working in New York animation for roughly 11 years at that time. I had been to festivals around the country and around the world, so I thought I had enough insight into some of the other cities, but I certainly didn't have, I wasn't as worldly minded as I am today in terms of North America's animation industry, I should say. And I wasn't as, I feel like refreshing this book this year gave me the chance to really try to make the book for our industry today. Like how do we reflect the diversity that we're starting to see in our industry and that we want to encourage further. So the book, absolutely aims to do that and really show that it's a whole new world. And it was a fun contrast to have Samurai Jack on the original cover, a macho male show, from, the typical boys club, creator world of the early 2000s and late 90s in the mainstream TV cartoon. But then to follow that with Bee and Puppycat in this edition, created by Natasha Allegri for a digital model where it was a web cartoon. So not only is it a female creator on the cover, but in a very much different business model, where the platform is completely different, and the freedoms that she had to make her cartoon were unparalleled. There was no version of that in 2004. So it was really a chance to refresh the book. And in doing so, I think the book itself is different for anyone who's read the original. It's probably about 60 to 70% new material, where I gutted a bunch of stuff from the past. And it really is a time capsule. There are several people who had passed away, from the original edition, which is interesting. And one of the funny things that you do when you write a book like this was just a year and a half of time to write the second edition. But I think a lot of people's career changed like 2 to 3 times. A lot of people's titles, I should say, changed 2 to 3 times while I was writing it. And I'm looking at you, Donna Lee, in terms of where you're working, and Koyalee Chanda especially. So, and certainly, Mike, has a mysterious new executive producer role on this upcoming Netflix show. So, but that's the fun part. This is a moving target. There's no book that can be the definitive final word on anything, right? So this is a snapshot of today. And the exciting thing for me is that everyone on this panel is in the book. And that's the fun part. When you do like 50 new interviews for a book, you get to just invite those panelists and get their perspective once again, in a whole new way through a panel like this. So that's all I really wanted to say, just to give you a little context for why this book. Actually, there's one more tidbit I'll say is I've been thinking of updating it for like the last 5 years, but I have a 4-year-old child, and like I don't see, having the time, to do things like that. So I just didn't even reach out to my publisher and ask them if they would be interested in something like that, even though the book was getting very dated. So what happened was, a year and a half ago, the publisher wrote me and said, hey, that book's getting pretty old. Do you want to refresh it? And then I thought, well, okay, they're asking for it. Now I got to do it, because this is a whole new level of reality, and the time's got to be right, because they're asking for it. So that just set it in motion, and I'm really glad it happened. And like so many of the things we work on, whether it's a personal film, a script, a pitch, samples for your portfolio, whatever, like you whittle away at it. You kind of spend time self-developing. And in the case of this book, I whittled away at it, did all interviews, wove in the new material, deleted a lot of old irrelevant stuff. And then by the time it comes out and I get a box of them in my living room, I'm shocked it's even here. You know, it's really that magic thing. And like in a career, like you're shocked when you start a new job, you know, it's like, but all the little things you had to do, those micro tasks to get it done are all behind you. And now you just have this achievement to have in your hands, or to have the idea of the new job that's gonna open the door, you know, when we go back into buildings again. You know, whatever that is, it's incredible when you're in that moment. So I hope the book is a great guiding light for all those that are attending this panel, for all the readers, and that it gives you a sense that you're not alone, you know, in this industry, and that there's so many people that have had to figure it out too. And even the ones who have figured it out, it's not like we're done making mistakes, or that we've reached the part where we kick our feet up and just spend the next 10 years in a hot tub, because you'd get very pruny if you did that. Make sure you get out of that hot tub. All right.
So never rest too long on your laurels.
That's it. Exactly. And with that, I'm going to start asking a group question, you know, for the panel. And for any panelists that want to jump in and answer this, I'm really curious, what attracted you to your career in animation? Like, even if it wasn't your original intention to have a career in animation, like how did this end up happening for you? Who wants to start? Joanna.
Yes, sorry. I feel like I'm in a classroom setting all of a sudden, but I knew at 10 years old, watching, you know, my favorite show, Animaniacs, that I was watching the credits, and it just dawned on me that people get paid to make cartoons. And I thought, well, why would anybody do anything else? And so I just went through the rest of my childhood and adolescence, assuming eventually I'd get there. I didn't really have a plan, but I just knew I'd end up there, because I'm not really good to do anything else. It's just going to have to be that way. So it wasn't really a soul search of any kind. It just felt like, yeah, the sun's going to rise tomorrow and I'm going to make cartoons.
Awesome. Love it.
I'll go next.
Donna.
Yeah, I think for me, I kind of fell into storyboarding kind of on accident, or kind of like a happy accident. I originally went to RISD to study animation, and 2D animation to be specific. But around that time, that's when 2D films were kind of going away, and it was transitioning to CG. And so, you know, that was kind of like a new thing, but I really wanted to draw. And I took animation classes, and as fun as they were, if you guys are animators out there, like, mad props, because it's a lot of work. And, you know, for me, I just love building stories. And ever since I was little, I could always remember coming up with stories of my own and doing spin-offs of my favorite movies. And so I just really love the storytelling element of it. And in animation, I just felt like I couldn't really achieve that. And so I actually moved out to LA. I didn't know anyone. I just kind of came out here to take this one storyboarding class that my cousin has recommended me to take. And he was like, I think you might like this. And when I took it, it was just like love at first sight. It had everything that I wanted. It focused on one whole scene instead of 3 seconds. And so that was just an amazing moment for me. And that's when I was like, okay, this is exactly what I want to do. And like, when you have that feeling and that moment of clarity, it's just the best feeling ever. So that's just how I knew I had to go into storyboarding.
So that was after a whole 4 years at RISD when you took this separate class.
No, it was actually after 2 years. So at
Okay,
RISD, they have the first year of foundation classes, and the second year, that's when you get into your majors. So after taking that class, I was like, okay, it was good seeing you at RISD, but I think I'm gonna stay in LA. So yeah.
Gotcha. Awesome.
Yeah, and I
Thanks,
guess yeah, I was doing right out of high school, right at the end of high school, I started doing stand-up, and I was also drawing comic strips, and doing those two things for about a decade with like a little bit of success, but like no money. Like you could be a successful stand-up comedian in LA and be broke. Like be like people think you're good, but it's like in a lot of the different type of performative arts in LA, you either make $0 or $1 million. There's no in between. And after about a decade, I was like, I am broke. How do I take these skills and apply them to a marketable field? And it was kind of like at the beginning of YouTube, and I was like, well, I'll try to turn one of my comic strips into a cartoon with Flash, which was like this big kind of democratizing software where you could just easily make a cartoon at home. And the very first cartoon I made was this cartoon called the Mustache Contest, and I put it on YouTube and Newgrounds. And I remember I put it on Newgrounds and just left it and went and checked back on it in a month, or no, in a week. And it had already been viewed like 1 million times. And I was like, whoa, this is way more people that have ever seen me do stand-up comedy. I think maybe this is something telling me to shift gears. And then that short got into a bunch of film festivals, like from Annecy to the HBO Aspen Comedy Festival, just Animation Block Party in New York, just all these great festivals. And I loved going to those festivals, and I was excited about the community and stuff.
That's great. And that's where you knew, like, this is where you're going to stick around and just have a paycheck. That's great. Very cool. And then briefly, for me, my dad was in advertising, so there was that commercial art. Oh, you could make money in the arts. It's not a starving artist situation. My dad's doing it, but I don't want to do advertising. Animation was what I loved, like Joanna, like just watching cartoons and trying to see, looking at all the names and the credits and imagining, a job for me one day. But I went to, an ordinary high school and in Long Island, and my guidance counselor, upon, when they have to do that interview with all the students and say, all right, what are your plans? Where do you want to go to school? What do you want to be? And I told him, I want to be an animator. And he said, what's that? I don't know what that is. And I said, well, cartoons, Bugs Bunny, Tom and Jerry, Mickey Mouse. He said, those are for kids. I said, right. Kids watch them, adults make them. And then he still didn't help him. He goes, well, you need a backup plan. You're going to need, there's electricians, there's plumbers, there's construction. I said, I don't need a backup plan. I have one plan and I'm going to stick with it. And I really left, just arguing with this guy. So luckily, I started making films. Not luckily, instead of having a social life, I got the family Super 8mm camera, got a camcorder, when those were a thing in the mid 80s. And I just spent my weekends and evenings making cartoons and not doing homework, trying to make my own version of Dumbo or my own 101 Dalmatians or whatever. And these were terrible, terrible things. They're nothing you'd share with anyone, even as a joke. But it taught me that I had the patience to do it. And a funny thing about animation, and I'm hoping the book kind of gives you this insight too, is, so many people want to have careers in animation, but it would kind of be like wanting to be an auto mechanic, but never getting under a car. If if you kept it abstract and then go, well, when I go to auto mechanic school, that's when I'll get under a car, but the ones who really want to do that are already under cars, right? They already spend the weekend under their parents' cars and like tinkering or get a jalopy and fix it up. Those are the people that know what it is, understand, can only think about that all day long. So I think if you have any interest in animation as a career choice, start getting your hands dirty and start trying it. And that could be comic strips, it could be making some storyboards, it could be writing some scripts or designing characters or trying some animation software. You got to kind of see what it is. How does it feel? Do you have the patience and interest to do it? Because like Donna said, on the animation side, it's so many drawings if you're drawing digitally these days, and it's so much discipline to make a effective 3D character rig too, right? There's a lot you're going to have to learn and do. So get into it now and don't wait for school to start. it's easier than ever to kind of get your hands in it now. We did not get Koyalee yet on this question.
Hi. So I actually came to animation via kids content. So as a young person, I would spend hours in my bedroom making up stories with my dozens and dozens of stuffed animals, and I would pull off all the books of the bookshelf and create little stuffed animal apartments, and they each had a job. And there's Donna, is that you too? Did you do that too? I don't know if your parents did. My parents were like really probably a little worried. Because I could spend hours, and I didn't at the time. It's just what brought me joy, and then that turned into studying theater in college, again much to my parents' chagrin, and realizing that actually when I graduated that with a degree in theater, and I was a director, I was studying directing, that ultimately if I were to be at the top of my game, which when you're the child of immigrants is sort of assumed that whatever you do, you'll be in the top of your game. I would be serving an audience that was quite elite. It was an audience that had access to theater. And that is like a really, I was like, it just felt like it wasn't the audience I wanted to serve. And I looked over at my sort of VHS at the time, VHS collection, and lo and behold, all as a college graduate, all of the content that I consumed was either a Pixar movie or the entire season of The Muppet Show. There was clearly a pull for me for content for kids, and so that was the moment where I decided to turn to television, and then got it wasn't a clear straight path, but I did ultimately get my first job on a then very little known show called Blue's Clues, which is where I met Dave and where we worked together. And it honestly was it kicked off my career, and I'm so grateful for that experience. So that's where it is.
That's awesome. That's a great segue to the next question. So I want to stay with you, Koyalee. So how did you get your job at Blue's Clues? So that was like the formative job. How did that happen?
I was one of those people that didn't know anyone in the industry. I didn't, I didn't have any connections at all. And so that's tricky, right? Everyone says it's who you know. What ended up happening was my roommate in Brooklyn, who's also I went to college with, was the craft service PA on an indie film where the associate producer saw that she had a great attitude, and that particular she was the production coordinator. That person, Wendy Harris, who is now a big time exec at 9 Story Media, she called my roommate and was like, I just got hired for this job at a Nickelodeon show. Do you want to work in kids TV? She just remembered my roommate Debbie having a great attitude, and my roommate Debbie was like, no, I don't want to do that. But she said, but you know who might? Is my roommate Koyalee. And frankly, actually, that same person also recommended our other friend Adam Peltzman, who is now showrunner, Go Dog Go, Odd Squad, Wally Kazam, and the two of us we're all friends from college, and so she recommended me and Adam Peltzman to Wendy, who then interviewed both of us, and we got hired within 3 weeks of each other on Blue's Clues.
My gosh, I know that seemingly seems like a luck out of nowhere kind of story, but there were definitely relationships there, and obviously you're a trusted person who had a roommate that trusted to be able to recommend you to a producer at Nickelodeon, and knew that you would come through.
I mean, I think the other thing too is that maybe that who you know might get you that first meeting or that first connection, but it's what you do with that opportunity that will define you and also make that impression, really make it stick. Because it's true that there is a bit of who you know, but also that networking, which you spend so much time, valuable time on in your book, Dave, is it is so important to always create connections. And it's at the end of the day, it's that network that will ultimately fuel your career. So, you know.
And then I'm going to borrow some more Koyalee wisdom, because in the book she shares like the three most important things are your reputation, your network, and your resume, right? The projects that you worked on. So, you know, network and reputation are so connected. Like, so really almost two of the three things you're saying are the most important to success are people-based, right?
100%, because, you know, when it comes down to it, or at least in my experience, I'd be curious to hear from others too. It's like that feeling of like you spend so much time with the people that you work with, and, you know, more than your own family. And can you get along? Like, are you like a pleasant person to be around? And that piece of it is so critical. You know, it's like can we work together? And what does it feel like when you're in a hard moment, or how you celebrate together? You know, it's sort of like when the ups and the downs, it's like these are your colleagues are your family ultimately. And so that idea of like always making sure that you maintain a really good relationship with everyone you've ever worked with and keep in touch with them, you know. And then the other two pieces is, you know, of course, your network, your reputation, and then your credit list, you know, your resume. And frankly, I have shows that I worked on that I do not put on my credit list because they're just not that good. And so you'll never know what those shows are. And that's okay, you know, because like
we could search you on IMDb.
I know that's fine. That's fine. You won't know which.
I found a flaw in your plan.
No, right? Damn it.
But they'd have to compare and contrast that with.
You don't know what I think of those shows, so there you
go. Awesome. And Joanna, I want to come to Joanna next, just real quick, Mike. Just because you've been working from home, and I know what Koyalee and I were just drilling down on is the whole idea of, you know, getting that first gig in an office. What was it like for you? Like your first break into the industry? Was it for a studio in-house, or have you always been working from home?
It started in-house. It was an internship my junior year of college, broadcast design studio, Primal Screen. So they did all kinds of different projects, and I got to just try my hand at everything. It was like real trial by fire, and I really, really loved it. And after college, I just went back to work for them full time. The whole working remote, working from home thing happened gradually. First, there were layoffs, and all of a sudden, congratulations, you're a freelancer. And it's funny how it's scary at first, but then you realize once you've had that network in place and you get that initial recommendation, contacts of people saying, like throwing work to you when they have overflow, when that snowball gets going, it turns into a real big boulder. And so it started with mostly on-site work, and then one or two jobs, like smaller jobs, saying, hey, this is low budget thing. If it's something you can do from home, just churn it out. And then those work from home projects got bigger and bigger. And then I started making contacts that were outside my local area, where it was impossible to work on site. And eventually the balance of on site and at home just went like shoop. And you know, this past year, everybody's been working from home, but I'm trying to think, I think it's been a couple years since I was working on site for anything. And the last one, it was like just a couple months at a time. So it was, yeah, pretty gradual, but it's like, I guess, a frog boiling, and all of a sudden I'm boiled. I've been boiled. When did this happen?
And your first paid opportunity came from the internship?
Yeah, they liked me, so they had me back.
Awesome. And that's really one of the keys too, right? Because even if was it an unpaid internship, I assume?
No, it was
Okay,
they were very generous, actually.
That's awesome. Terrific.
Yeah.
But it's still kind of an audition, right? To have the title intern. So, you know, that really is, internships, you know, are a really great gateway, or they can be, right? Especially if it's the right environment for you, and you get to prove your worth. That's fantastic. Awesome. And I know Mike was ready to share a fun story.
Sorry, I was confused.
So Mike, I'm looking for because especially how you broke into the industry. So you had that interesting revelation that you could get all those views on Newgrounds, but how did that end up into like a foot in the door at your first job?
Look at Joanna's room she's in. That's like only in Atlanta could you sit in a room that big. This is,
I love it.
I'm here in Los Angeles and this is it. You're looking at my house. This is everything. I pay $5,000 a month for this and it's just this little square.
There's a house for sale on our block. You're welcome to come over, check it out.
Yeah, I was remember what Koyalee was saying about how your coworkers become like your new family. On season 1 of BoJack, I remember I was leaving. I was working there so much. I would work for like a month straight with no days off. And there was one time when I was heading home and I just looked at my phone and said, I just said, directions home. And then it pulled up my work address, like the address of Shadow Machine. It had switched. The phone had made a decision to switch, and that work was my new home. And I was like, ooh, this is bleak.
Oh my gosh. So, but take us back in the time machine before that happened.
To the beginning of the bleakness?
Yeah. No, to your first step into like convincing someone, hey, I didn't go to Cal Arts. I didn't go to the School of Visual Arts, like, but you still had a great role.
Well, once I started making shorts and was having some success with festivals, I decided, oh, if I'm going to do this, maybe I should try to do it right. And I applied to Cal Arts and I didn't get in. I was rejected. And they said, but they suggested I reapply in a year. But I just kept banging out shorts. And by the time the year came back around, I was working at the Disney Channel, and kind of never stopped working since then. And the way I got that first job, it was like in Disney Channel preschool stuff for like Playhouse Disney. And I was just basically, I was so intoxicated with my ability to make shorts and submit them to festivals and then have them showed at these in theaters and everything that I was just creating so much content and taking advantage of, you know, all of my friends from comedy to do voices and everything, make music. And I think when I had trouble getting a first job, but then I ended up applying for this job with Chris Hamilton, who does all this Disney preschool stuff for Oddbot. And I think he looked at how he brought me in and he saw that I had made so much stuff. And I've had this opportunity. This has happened to me too, when hiring on BoJack and Tuca and Birdie, where I think he was like, this person just can't stop drawing. I'm going to have him do it for me. Like, he seems to be maybe a little crazy. He can't stop drawing and animating. Like, let me aim his fire hose of ambition in the direction of this Disney preschool show. And so, yeah, I ended up getting hired on that. And I just was hired as an animator. And on that first job, I became like the lead animator because I was working so hard. And then I had so much trouble getting a job. And then when that one was over, to what Koyalee was saying, I proved so reliable to my coworkers. You're kind of like, you're working for your boss, but at the same time, you're also trying to impress your coworkers, impress them in that you're talented, and impress them as in that you're trustworthy, like she was saying, like, because you're going to get your next job from them kind of telling you about it, especially early on like that. And nobody wants to recommend somebody who's going to embarrass them or damage their reputation. So I proved to be trustworthy. And when that job was over, everybody was like, hey, we're going over to this job. You should apply too. And I was like, oh, okay. And so it was like, I was so out and then I was so in. Once you got in and proved it, then I was so in. But before I was like out in the cold. But yeah, and And then we hopped over to a Comedy Central thing, and then we hopped to another thing, and hopped to another thing, and then I just kept hopping around. Very nomadic at first, like, but finally settled into longer term employments. I think when the first time I went to buy a condo in Glendale, remember the person at the bank was like, you worked for 12 different places last year. I was like, yeah. And they're like, why did you work for 12 different places? I was like, I'm an animator. Because I was working during the day at Disney Channel, but also pulling down a bunch of freelance like Joanna, like in the evenings and weekends and everything. And it was so confusing to the bank. Anyway.
Yeah, and what I love too, Mike, in that story is just that you haven't forgotten that, like that Chris Hamilton, saw that in you and gave you a shot. Hey, this guy, has this quality, and I know he's works really hard and he's prolific and he can do that for us. Like that, you recognize that in applicants that you're in the power to hire.
Yeah,
so
like
that's really great.
Now because we were like just hiring people a lot, so often so hard to find people. And we would just be on Instagram looking for people. And then you go through Instagram and you're like scrolling and you're like, whoa, this person just can't stop drawing. They're just like constantly drawing. And then you're like, aim this talent towards our horse show.
That's great. Cool. And Donna, I want to make sure we get to ask you the same question. Like, so how did you parlay your newfound passion of doing storyboards into that first gig that paid you to start doing that?
Oh, it was a journey. So, it's funny because I actually applied for CalArts too. And so my plan was to move out to LA, apply to CalArts, and then, like go to school there, graduate, and then land a job at Disney or, some big studio. So I moved out here for a year, and it was like all new. But the crazy thing is that, I'm from Chicago, and, I lived in the East Coast, but, there's not too much of an animation scene out there. But ever since taking that class and just connecting with the people in the classroom, like, guys, when it comes to networking, like, it also comes down to networking just people like us or people like you, who's trying to break into the industry, or just like your classmates, your friends, because you don't know where those connections can go to. And, if they work on a show and someone asks them like, hey, do you have a friend who might be interested in this other gig that we have? And, they can recommend you. And so those connections are key, guys. And so for me, like, I built so many of these connections through my friends. And not that I was like using them as connections, but it's just genuinely like I loved being around them. I felt like I was being inspired. I felt like I can grow with them as an artist. And even till this day, I like the first friends that I've made in LA, like I'm still friends with them now, and we've just grown together. And it's just so satisfying to see how much we've grown since then. And so I kept taking classes. I kind of was taking part-time jobs here and there just to make some money. Like I said, like I didn't have any family out here. So I had to kind of like convince my parents, like, I'm going to be okay. Like I am making a little bit of money, and yes, rent is expensive, but it's fine. It's worth it. And I just kind of had to work with what I got. So, for a story artist or a storyboard artist, if you're interested, as there's a lot of drawing. And so for me, I would just go out cafe sketching. I would go to free life drawing classes, just go to a library, check out all those sweet animation books, because in LA, there's animation books everywhere. And I'm just so happy that Dave is creating this amazing book, because when I read it, I was like, man, I wish I had this book when I was like starting out. This is great. And so I was just taking like every opportunity to network, meet professionals, get their advice and feedback on my portfolio, because I knew that I had a long journey ahead of me. And so that was kind of like the schedule that I've been, doing as I was building my portfolio to be a story artist. And there's this one professional that I met, and his name is Sean Bishop. He's an amazing story artist / director in this industry. And he knew someone who was looking for a story artist. And the first time I met him, I had an incompleted portfolio, but A few months later, like I would say maybe like 5 or 6 months later, he still remembered me, only because like I thanked him so much for his time, even though it was like 15 minutes. I was like genuinely just like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. Like, you don't know how much your words mean to me. Like, I'm gonna try so much harder with all those feedback that you gave me. And I think that went a long way. And we stayed in touch, and he reached out, and that's how I landed my first gig at Disney Toons as a full-time story artist, which till this day, I'm like, wow, that's really lucky. And so I think it was like, just like what Koyalee said, it's like three things, right? It's like you need your work to be ready, it's timing and networking. It's like, I completely agree with that. And so with all of those three combined, that's how I was able to land the first gig. But with the CalArts thing, like, I actually got rejected. And so that was like a huge dip in my journey. I was like, great, I'm a failure. I'm just gonna like not make it in this industry. This is great. But, it's like, there's so many different ways to break in. And, yeah, I'm glad that I'm not the only CalArts reject here. But yeah,
And
it's
we did break in, and I remember I was sitting right next to CalArts graduates, and they had like $1 million of student loans, and I had zero, no student loans.
yeah.
I just had my hands back, and I was animating with my feet. Couldn't have been more casual.
Yeah, I mean, like, luckily, like, I was actually able to make friends with like some of the CalArts students there, and so in a sense, they were sharing some of their knowledge to me, and I was like, oh, I'm like going to school without paying for it. It's just us. It's we share information all the time, and so that's why I'm saying, like, just reach out, just be friends with everybody, and just share that knowledge with one another. Like, it's yeah. You get it from everywhere. There's so many resources nowadays.
I love too in your story, Donna, that the appreciation you showed Sean Bishop for taking that time and giving you tips, and that you were able to use and wanted him to know how much you appreciated that. And
yeah,
then
I
helped him
own
remember
my
you.
first child.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Well, we've heard it here, folks. We got to honor that. This is a contract. This Zoom meeting is a contract.
Absolutely.
But that really is
Maybe,
special. And
maybe
I
send
wouldn't.
them a bottle of wine. Send them a bottle of wine or a bottle of champagne or something. I keep your
That'll be
first
good enough.
child.
I agree with Mike. And the thing that I would encourage you all to do, because I'm sure everyone, all our viewers here are having, there's potential mentors in your life or ones you're still going to meet. Definitely make sure, you could very much appreciate them as much as Donna did, but make sure they know it. Make sure you send a card, you follow up, or just show them some updates down the road that show that you listened and were inspired by that advice. That's how these become relationships and an ongoing conversation, because everyone meets somebody somewhere, right? But if it doesn't stick with any follow-up or with any professional follow-through, it's not going to really be a value, and not that I'm trying to say it has to have a value or you shouldn't have, there was no reason to connect with someone, but Donna was a value to Sean because he needed a story artist. The value goes both ways, and if you want to just to be in that, to make that kind of work for you, and not just in your development, but also as a great connection that can be mutually beneficial, you really do gotta keep it going and show that appreciation.
There's something else about, Donna, your story that really struck me, which I think is a really important thing to note, which is you got feedback from Sean and how you accepted and took in the feedback to improve your work. I'm sure to Sean spoke volumes for your own work ethic and what you might be like as an employee, because so much of being working in the industry is to be able to take feedback graciously and apply it to your work and improve your work. And so I mean that, and I meet with people all the time, give them I give them advice on their work and their pitches and this and that, and frankly, the people that can take the feedback in a gracious way are always just so much more pleasant, and really, like, it speaks highly of them and their character. So I think that's an amazing thing to note.
That's awesome,
It's also quite often frustrating when you are working on a show or a movie, because you will give feedback, and like you're saying, Koyalee, that a lot of times it's met with resistance or being bothered by it, and often half the time the feedback is like, it's because that storyboarder doesn't know what's happening in another sequence. It's not that the work is wrong, it's that it doesn't work because of how it hooks up, or because that character wouldn't do that because they did something contrary to that in the next sequence, or the creator of the show said, I remember on BoJack, the creator was tired of air quotes, because every storyboarder just goes crazy with air quotes. It's like indicating, like, you need to go over there if you want to. It's like, after a while, it's like, is this a show about kids with sign language? Because there's so much hand stuff going on. Yeah, and I would have to tell storyboarders, like, can you kill the air quotes? And they'd be like, why? And I'm like, I mean, they're fine, you're using them fine, but the creator doesn't want air quotes anymore. Yeah, it's like, not even like your work is wrong. You're just like air traffic control at that point of notes.
It's a team sport. And I think that's why Koyalee's pointing that out too. And that's why Donna probably instinctually knew that in taking feedback, and Mike is giving examples of on the job feedback that he has to give, that each person there has insight and a bigger picture role, who's giving feedback like that. And that relationship of how we work with a crew, it really is a team sport. And it's that level of patience and understanding about the note process, is really key. I want to make sure I come back to Joanna on another topic, which this is my last group question. Then I'm already starting to get some questions from our viewers, our attendees. I don't know what to call you, wonderful people. Viewers, attendees,
Participants.
Yeah, air quotes. We should all just air quotes. Yeah, but Joanna,
before on the
that's okay. Can you give us what is your day-to-day now? This is gonna be my question for all of you, like your day-to-day now, your current position and role on the project that you're focusing on. So if that's being an at-home freelancer and balancing being a working mom and all the things you're doing, what is that like? What's a snapshot for everybody watching?
I'm doing part-time hours right now and working mostly at night after the kids go to bed. I have a babysitter come for 4 hours on Mondays, so I can get a chunk of time when I'm relatively conscious. Because it's hard to, it's like I go through like a lot of peaks and drops in my energy throughout the day, but it's not the best system. I'm not trying to say it's great and it works out, but so far we've survived, and we've been through a lot this year, and we're just trying to get back to some sort of daily routine that feels like it's normal, that it's healthy and normal. But I'm reluctant to go through it hour by hour because it'll just sound insane.
I have joked that, and it's just a joke before anybody gets bent out of shape, that at the end of the pandemic, there should be a monument built to all the first responders, and next to it, a monument built to all the parents of 4-year-olds. It's been I have a 4-year-old just turned 5, and it's been interesting.
Mm-hmm. It's funny. It's hard to explain to colleagues who don't have kids, because a while back I was talking with somebody about a job that sounded like a really cherry gig, and I said, it sounds great, but I just don't have the time. I've got I've got my little one, and I just had a baby, and I'm just trying to make sure they stay alive. And he didn't understand what it takes to have a baby. So I was like, can't you just set them next to you and work? Because it's not that much. You can just 4 or 5 hours a day. And I was like, no, you can't. They're not puppies. You can't put them in a crate. But what's great is ever since then he's adopted a baby, and now he's like, oh, I get it now.
You know what they love? You know what 4-year-olds love?
Mm.
These Cintiq pens.
Oh yeah, I like to chew on them and everything. Yeah.
Just to kind of bang on the Cintiq. Or yeah, and if they're not banging on the Cintiq, what they love to do is bang on a keyboard. They love to bang on a keyboard.
Well, they're so interested in what we're staring at on these screens all day and moving this thing around all day. They want to get into the action. And my now 6-year-old, she wants to make another How to Train Your Dragon movie, and she promised to hire me, but she'll often say she's got a meeting at DreamWorks.
That's wonderful.
My son, he said he told me very early on that he was a character designer on Moana, because he understood that it was in animation. He's like, oh, I'm in animation too. I'm a character designer on Moana. He didn't realize that the timeline didn't even work. Like, he wasn't even alive when that step of the process was underway on the film Moana.
When my daughter was 5 and I was working on the show called Wally Kazam, I would sit and watch animatics with her, and she would be like, watch, and then she'd be like, wait, stop, go back. And I'd go back, and she's like, her foot moved. And like sure enough, like the foot was like slid in the animatic, is hand drawn. And I was like, I mean, come on, that's baked into the model. I mean, it's not going to be like, you know, that's the layout pass. Come on. No, but her eye is she's a continuity expert. I think that's for sure.
We should get all the kids together and put some material.
Exactly.
It'll be adorable.
That's the future of animation right there.
Yeah.
Wild. And Joanna, anything else you want to say just in terms of the day-to-day juggling?
Not really. It's not. I feel like I shouldn't say anything, because then it'll sound like advice, and I'm not in a position to give advice on the right way to do anything.
No, but that's what
Why am I on this panel? Am I kicked out?
He wants us to give advice.
I do, yeah.
Oh man, I just, did not advocate for myself very well just then. The advice is sleep is very important, and make sure that when you are planning out your daily schedule, that's part of it. Sleep is part of your schedule.
Oh yeah. And what in terms of like the strategy of keeping up your YouTube channel is part of the day-to-day, or how do you fit that in?
Oh, I'm sad you brought that up. I had actually neglected it for many months until you contacted me about this panel and reminded me, and I was like, oh crap, I got to do that again. So
Need a fresh upload.
Yeah, last Saturday I just did my first one in a few months, because this spring and summer there was a lot going on with my family. We moved, had to do a lot of work on the house to get it livable, and so my YouTube channel sort of went. All my personal projects and everything were not a priority, but they are important to me, and I get a lot of joy doing the live streams, and it's really good training too, to just like draw characters that as the premise of the live streams is that they're request live streams, total request live. Thank you, 90s. And they just shout out characters, and I draw them as well as I possibly can. And it's usually characters I've never even heard of, so I have researched a little bit of it. And so it's good training for me to stay limber and, find new cartoons, honestly. And so it's fun for me. It's important to me. It's a great way to connect with people. It's it's nice to have company, working from home. It feels like I'm not just by myself in the basement anymore. So it's becoming more of a priority after I make sure I get some sleep. But it's something that has value other than just social media points, which when we get to that part of the panel, I have my own opinion on social media as well. But it's if something is of value, if something is important, you're going to find a way to work that in somewhere into your life. It may not be as often or as elaborate as you had hoped. Everything is a work in progress. Nothing's ever going to be perfect. And the more I sort of reframe my thinking to just let go of the idea of near perfect, then the happier everybody is.
Excellent. Thank you. I think that's very good advice. You had good advice in there.
Somewhere in there. Ramble, I'm sorry.
No.
I'll mute now.
It was great. Mr. Mike, in terms of like, what does it mean in a day-to-day way to be a supervising director of something like BoJack?
Well, first, I just want to follow up on what Joanna said, and I want to apologize to everybody. I haven't updated my live journal in 20 years, but I'm gonna do it, I promise. Yeah. To be the supervising director? Yeah, you know what, one thing that's interesting getting into that is one thing that I found daunting when I was first getting into animation, and probably a byproduct of not going to college for animation, is that I didn't exactly know how to make a show. Like, it's a daunting thing. Like, how do I plug into this machine? I don't even understand this machine. And then one thing, something I've come into understanding in the last few years is that every show is made differently. It's like they crew together a show, and then they look, all right, who are all these people we hired? What are their skills? And then they kind of build the framework of how the show gets made around the people they hired. And then sometimes you might get hired on a show like the 3rd season or the 4th season, and then there's a structure to how the show is getting made, but it was formed back in season 1 based on the crew that they brought together, and those people might not even be there anymore. So my job, I was a supervising director on BoJack and Tuca and Birdie, was expansive. I directed the pilot, and so I was kind of in charge of approving all the storyboards, all of the character designs, all of the prop designs, and I would sit in the editorial room and get the episode in shape for the creator to come in and watch. Like, I would approve all the storyboards and then get ingested into editorial, and then I'd go and sit in editorial. And I came from comedy, and I'm really keen on making sure a joke is executed correctly. So like, I would push more than maybe another supervising director or other animation people to like get the sound effects in and like get temp music in to make sure this joke plays the way it's supposed to play, because I'm just in love with the proper execution of a gag, but even dramatic stuff. Like, if I know that this is how this dramatic thing is supposed to get played, then I want to make sure it's played correctly. And then in my role, I would even I would get in there in editorial and see that a scene wasn't working, or scene joins weren't working, or there was like a downbeat moment needed to kind of like bridge between 2 storylines. And I would write that. I would write the downbeat, or I would write a patch to make the scene work and basically put it in there. The creator knew, because the creator didn't write it, so he knew I didn't have to be like, oh, and I've done this and this is new, please forgive me. It's like he supervised the writing of the script, so he understands where there's been where it's deviated from the script. And Raphael was so great. Like, he would instantly know it's deviated. He could see why I deviated and would often say nothing, and it would just go through, or recognize the problem and think that he had a tweak for how to fix the problem. So super collaborative. But then, and then I was talking once with a friend who worked on Rick and Morty, the color supervisor, and I'm a big fan and friend of Pete Michaels, who was the supervising director of that show. And I was like, oh, I haven't talked to Pete in the longest time. Like, how is he doing? And he's like, who? And I was like, oh, the supervising director, Pete Michaels. He's like, oh, I don't ever really talk to him. And then I was like, oh shit, I think I'm doing too much work. Like, this guy's a color supervisor and he doesn't even know the name of the supervising director. Like, he has to be reminded who he is. because Pete was just supervising the boards basically and letting the art director handle the supervising of all the assets that get shipped. And then I was like, oh shit, I've been working too hard all these seasons. And obviously that shows a success. So I'm not saying like, it's not like some scandalous thing like, oh, that guy's not doing his job right. It's like, that shows a terrific success. Obviously everything's being done correctly. But it's just being done different.
But that's
yeah,
also based on what you wanted to take on, right? Like where you have a lot to contribute in a lot of different areas that are part of your vision.
yeah, I always say kind of like you get into these shows, and if you're in these producer or whatever positions, I always get in there and be like, oh, I kind of want to be involved in this. So you stretch out in this way and go, oh, there's no pushback. Yeah, I'm over in this area. And then I want to be involved over in this area, and you stretch and there's no pushback, and go, oh, and I want to go, somebody bit my foot, and go like, oh, no, they don't want me to be involved in that. I'll leave that to them. Obviously, I'm not wanted here. But that's what you do. You just kind of like get in there. If you want to be like super involved in the creative and stuff, you just get in there and stretch out until you reach resistance or find resistance. And then you go respectfully like, oh, okay, no, that's your thing. No worries. But I'm already stretched out into this area. There's no takebacks.
Love that. And my follow-up on that is with Donna, like in terms of, does that happen as a story artist too? Like what Mike is describing, like that kind of getting involved in areas that are beyond the sequence you're assigned on Frozen 2? Like, do you comment on the overall arc if something's not working, or the joining sequence, but being storyboarded by somebody else? Like what's it like, and is that somewhat up to you as well in terms of how much you reach out into other areas?
So, I mean, we as story artists, we work together as a team. And so, you know, we would be in the room with the director, sometimes the writers and the producer and our head of story, which is kind of like the supervisor of like the story team. I think from what Michael has, you know, described, I think it's definitely the role of what the head of story would do. And that's kind of the person who would be overseeing everything. Like they would know all the sequences that each story artist is working on, and they would be in the meetings with the writer and the director, and they would kind of come in and be like, oh, hey, like, you know, we have this person who's working on this scene already. Like, you know, you guys just came up with this brand new idea. It might affect that. And so, you know, it's a lot for a director to keep in mind of all the things that they want to change. And so the head story is kind of there to make sure that, you know, the things are lining up, and that, you know, most of the stuff that the rest of us are working on is, you know, on track. And, you know, she'll also, or the head of story will kind of be there to kind of let us know like, hey, stop whatever you're doing. We're going to have to pull this new idea and slap it onto your scenes. So hang on tight, and we're going to reissue that scene to you. So the head of story is kind of like the mediator between like all the changes and stuff like that. But however, you know, that won't stop the story team to, you know, come together and even, you know, come up with some of our own ideas that we want to pitch to the director. Or if we're like, hey, you know, like we actually thought of this really great idea, like, what do you guys think? And so as a team, it's so great to work with one another. And even when you're on your own scene, like when I was on Frozen 2 and like the recent movie, like Raya and the Last Dragon, it was just so fun to be in the studio and just pop over to someone else's office and being like, hey, what are you doing in that scene? Oh, okay. Yeah, I was thinking of this idea, and it could be a really fun setup for that payoff in your scene. And so, you know, the fun part about our job is that we can be collaborative. We can, you know, join our forces together and like come up with stuff that we can add into the movie. And, you know, it's just so cool to look at like Frozen 2 and Raya, where I'm like, oh my gosh, that was the idea that I put in there. They actually really liked it. And, you know, it's really fun to see those changes happen in real time, and just to, you know, remember those moments where you get to work as a team. And I think, you know, for my day-to-day job, it's, you know, there's a lot of times where I work by myself and I just chug away on my scene. But a lot of times I just have to, you know, reach out to my other story artist friend and being like, I just need a second opinion on this. Like, what do you think? Like, what's your reaction to this? And that's kind of the fun part. Like, I personally am not the type of person to like be alone. Like, everyone's different, right? Like, some people can be in their offices all day and just not talk to anyone. But I think for me, I just need that second person to, talk to and bounce ideas off of. So
Fresh
yeah.
eyes. It goes a long way. Fresh eyes. A lot
Yeah.
of people realize when you do become a director, you spot a lot of errors, not because you're better than the story artist, but because you're looking at it for the first time, and there's that forest for the trees thing. Like when you work on a sequence for 3 days, 5 days, 2 weeks, a month, you can't see the forest for the trees anymore. And then the director comes in, looks at it with fresh eyes, and goes like, "Oh, that character died in the second act or whatever." And you're like, "Oh yeah, of course I know that."
Are you saying you can get lost in the woods? That's a Frozen 2 joke for you. Sorry. That was terrible.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Yay. I want to throw this question to Koyalee too, and then I'm just going to hit the the questions from the audience. Koyalee, your day-to-day, like as a VP of Kids and Animation at Hello Sunshine, what's that like? Is there a day-to-day that you could actually describe?
Yeah, I mean, so we have a combination of shows that are in active development, and we are also sort of fielding new projects as well. So we're at this point, we're about to take out a bunch of projects to sell. And in order to get them ready, we are executing on visual development. We're working with writers to get the Bible together. We are creating pitch decks to best showcase the project in the sort of funniest and most appealing way. And then also tailoring, frankly, to buyers based on what we know they're looking for, that we can kind of highlight different aspects of these projects in order to make them appropriate for different buyers. So my day-to-day is really tapping each of these projects. I have about 4 or 5. My focus is preschool and bridge content. And so it's really just making sure that I'm moving these projects forward, that each one is getting the feedback that they need to move forward. Sometimes that will be hopping on a call with the studio to give them notes on visual development. Sometimes it'll be like a writer is stuck and I'll be like, "Hey, I'm available. You want to hop on a call?" "Yes." "Okay." And then just beat out something with a writer because they need some brainstorming help. I love my job because I get to really like help creative move forward. And also there's like both the creative, but also the business. So it's like one of the things I'm doing right now is finding like pairing animation studios with projects. So I'm like, I know this animation studio does amazing work. I have a project that looks nothing like they've ever done. And I'm like, I'm going to bring it to them, because if I write this other project that looks like everything else they've ever done, it's going to look like everything else they've ever done. But I know they'll be excited to do a project that like is totally different. It's like, maybe they only do human characters and this is like all animals, and like they can just they can just show off their animation chops, and they'll be hungry for the project. It'll be embracing a part of them. It'll be tapping into some creative stuff, juices that they haven't been able to tap into. And I know they'll be that much more committed. So that's been one of the other things, is just being able to like be like, you know what, this is a studio that does excellent work, but they've never done something like this before. I know they can do it, and like, here you go. And sure enough, like recently, this is exactly what happened. I tapped this very, very well-known animation studio for a project that that I'm obsessed with. I'm so excited about. And yeah, they are just like so fired up about it. And I'm like, that's what it should be. Like, we should all be challenged, even if like you're an Emmy-winning, Oscar-winning studio. Like, you should look at a project and say, I love this and I want to do it, because we're all artists, like all of us, like if we have to fall in love with the creative, otherwise, like, why are we doing this? So that's so like, I have ups and there. I really am so grateful for my everyday, honestly. I mean, look, it's COVID. I have 2 kids at home. It's hard. It's also really, really challenging, but you have to hold on to the wins, because otherwise, like, this year It's been a rough one for a lot of us. And like, so I'm just trying to hold on to that.
That's awesome. Thanks, Koyalee. And then I think we can see how efficient we can be on these answers, because I want to make sure we get to all the chat questions. So I'm going to throw one out, and if you're a panelist and you feel like, hey, I want to answer that, then just jump in. One anonymous question was, do we have any advice on how we scheduled working at a non-art day job while trying to pursue and develop your skills for a career in animation? Anyone have any idea, any advice on that balance?
One great thing is, if you're in your 20s, you have nothing but energy. And you would do your day job and then come home and draw all night, which I used to do. I used to supplement that with a lot of Red Bull vodkas.
So caffeine of some sort, whatever it is of your choice. But I love that. Yeah, just kind of putting in the hours where you have them, like Mike is saying. One answer I'll add to his answer real quick. When I had my first and really only layoff period, knock on wood, in animation, it happened in my first 2 years in the business. And during that time, I was able to coast on some savings. So I didn't have to get a day job, but I'd made a day job for myself. And that was working on my own indie film, and which turned out to take 2 years. But for this 6 months of dead time, I ended up working on it every day, like a discipline. So I'd go on interviews, whether they were informational interviews or actual job interviews for specific positions. And they always asked me, what are you working on now? Oh, I see you work for Michael Sporn Animation, but what do you do now? And instead of saying, well, I wake up at noon, I eat a bag of potato chips and I see what's on TV, I was able to say, I'm working on my own indie film. And then I would actually pull out from my little duffel bag, here's a scene I did this morning. And then I would like flip through and I'd show them the animation paper. And it was like, they immediately saw me in a different light. And I felt good about myself because I wasn't getting paid by anyone in animation at the moment, but I still felt I had a good answer to that question, which always came up. And social, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
I want to.
But building on what you said about working on your own film and showing what you have, people have this notion that unless it's perfect and polished and finished, that you don't show it. But you should show every scrap of paper that you've ever doodled on. You should show what you're working on, what you're thinking about working, your lists of things to do, because you never know what's going to speak to somebody. You never know what's going to click with somebody. So always not just working on your own stuff, but always going, blah, I'm working on everything, letting people know and not being shy. I think that one thing that especially animation artists students suffer from is just a lot of shyness. And it's unfortunate that you can't really keep that shyness your whole life. You have to overcome that, with little bits. Start by sharing work that you may or may not be entirely comfortable with sharing just yet.
Yeah, and a lot of people in animation are shy, and it's important to remember that you may feel shy and you're afraid to reach out, but your coworkers are also shy too. It's not like you're the only shy person, like in a incredibly gregarious field. You're working with a bunch of shy people. So I remember there was a young lady who I discovered through this loop-de-loop little microfilm festival that I used to run in LA, and she was so great. And I got her a job on BoJack as a storyboarder, and I said, all right, that's it. I got you the job. You're on your own now. But I'll tell you what, those people down there, you should make them your best friends. They're going to invite you to their stupid Dungeons and Dragons games, and you should go to it. I'm never going to go to it because it's stupid. But you should go to it because that's how you're going to become friends with them. Okay, that's it. Get out of here. Get out of my office.
I love it. That's a great answer. All right, I'm going to throw another speed question at you all. This might appeal more to Koyalee and Mike, but we'll see. What do you consider the most important part of a pitch, and what is not so important to focus on in a pitch? So the most important part and the least important part.
Koyalee takes them, so she should answer.
The most important is the why. Why is this a show? Why is it your show? And why do you love it? If there's a real connection between, and I think this is actually maybe more now than maybe even 10 years ago, that the creator needs to be intrinsically linked to the content, that there has to be even if it's I just think that a lot of successful pitches that start with like a little bit of a story from the creator, a personal story on why, what inspired them to make this show is so helpful, because it just frames, it gives the story an immediate sense of heart and purpose. And then all of a sudden you can tap in, if you know where the creator's passion comes from, then it's much easier as an executive to hook into that passion and say, oh, I see the story you're trying to tell, and then I can see why that would work for us or not, or what I can, where I could see it going. And I think that that's like the most critical part.
Yeah, and what I could add to it is you're not going to sell a show as an unknown. It's just not going to happen. So if you're interested, if you see your future being having a show on Cartoon Network, or having a show Netflix preschool, or having a show on Nickelodeon, you should go and get a job at Nickelodeon or Netflix preschool or Cartoon Network and become known to those people and trusted. And then you will really have your foot in the door, become a known entity at the place where you want to excel or sell a show.
That's great, thanks. Excellent double answer there. What do you look for in a team member or artist? Any specific skills or attributes you find helpful? I know Donna's talked a lot about being on a team and how she bounces off her fellow artists.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's a lot going back to like giving feedback, and not only should you be good at receiving feedback, you should be good at giving feedback. And it doesn't have to be like, I think this is wrong or this is wrong. Like there could be positive feedback too. Just even if it's like another peer of yours, just going up to them going like, hey, I just saw your scene and it was great. My favorite part was this because of da 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 da. Like if you explain those reasons and you're giving them those feedback, you're giving them, like what Michael said, like those fresh eyes, and that just goes a long way. And so being able to be constructive, as a team member is just amazing. You'll be constructive not just to your peers, you'll be constructive to your supervisors, to your directors or your bosses. So for me, when I look for a team member, and I remember even at Disney when I was hiring people or helping hire people, if there were interviews, we'd be like, oh, like how do you deal with this issue? And if they are able to think of something on the spot and tell us like, oh, I really like collaborating and I like to share what I think about certain things, like that goes a long way. But obviously do it with a respectful manner. No one wants to be like, I mean, it depends, right? Like I think every show is different, where some directors or bosses, they'll be like, yeah, just say it blatantly, like just do whatever. But just feel out the room, just being able to really be aware, read the room first, and then come up with your answers, because some people might not react too well with like super honest feedback. So just being able to gauge that too can go a long way.
That's great. Kind of trust your gut and develop those instincts to read the room and just know what the right time and place might be, or who's open and who's not.
Exactly.
That's great. Yeah.
I would add something. The chapter in your book where you talked in great detail about how to craft emails, basically, and how often, how to be persistent but not annoying. I mean, these are things, like I was reading it like, oh my gosh, I need to change my ways. But it was so important, not to overwhelm anybody, but just the way you present yourself and the way you show your professionalism, and with all the soft skills, like being on time and being communicative and being somebody that people can depend on. That part of your book is what I wish more people would talk about. Just animation is a very unique industry, but it is still also a business. It is still It still has to run like a business where people need the same things that would make you excel in any business.
I would also add to that, that make sure that your social media presence, if it's discoverable, is the kind of presence that you would want a possible employer to see and be appropriate for. I know that is kind of like, not fun, but it's also just practical. I mean, this is where we are. Like the first thing you do is Google somebody. Everybody does it, and just be aware that that's what's happening.
Yeah, if you want to work at Disney preschool, don't have a bunch of scandalous drawings on your Instagram.
Yeah. Good advice. And this is rolling into like the next question practically. What's the biggest mistake you see new graduate artists make? I mean, in a sense, you've just given one answer to it, just kind of not editing your social media presence.
Yeah, I find often that it's really troubling that I'll receive a resume and there's no cash paper clipped to it. It's kind of a real rookie move.
You should just have them Venmo you, Mike.
That's true. Maybe I should check my Venmo.
Check your Venmo.
It's probably bulging at this point. It's all Bitcoin in there.
If I could say one thing is that what I've noticed is that, there's students who are interested in so many fields and they want to do viz dev, character design, storyboarding, animating. And like, while that's super great, when you're building your portfolio, just make sure you cater towards it to one thing, and it'll make, the recruiter's job a lot easier. And as much as you want to tell them that you can do all of these things, I think it's just great to just focus on one discipline and just stick with that. And, on the side, you can be like, well, I also have a character design portfolio if you are interested in looking at it for the character design job. So when you're applying for a job, make sure that you're applying for one job, and that whatever you're sending in, whatever you're emailing is all catered towards that. So if you are, applying to be a story artist, make sure that your portfolio is catered towards storyboarding, or it's be specific with the job title that you're applying for, if it's like a storyboard revisionist job or if it's a storyboard artist job. So just making sure that you cater towards one thing, and you can save all those other stuff for later. I think that is the best way to do it, because I've seen a lot of people and I've heard a lot of people being like, I want to do all these things. And I'm like, yes, but when you apply, like, we can't, like, as a story artist, like, I can't give you feedback for character design. Like, I can't, like, I don't feel responsible to give you those kind of feedback. So yeah, that's one thing I would keep in mind.
And then weirdly, to counterpoint, Donna, for TV, which is more scrappy in ways, we would often look for people who could do multiple things.
Oh, that's interesting.
We could employ, because I'm looking for people who I can, because there's so much competition job-wise, that I would look for somebody who I could put on storyboards and then roll on to compositing. That way they could, I could offer them a full year of employment. Because if they can only do backgrounds, then I could only offer them 6 months of employment, and then I'm gonna lose them. But if they can do backgrounds and then roll into animation retakes, then I could say, like, I have a year's worth of employment for you, which would be more, which would help maybe my job that I'm offering them against another job that I'm offering them a year of work, and this other person on another great show is only offering you 6 months of work. Yeah, so I would try to like work the angles like that.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
You mentioned earlier that you said, every show is made differently. There's like a million different processes. And so I found it's really useful when you know what you want to do, like Donna said, also where you want to be. You have to research what those studios and what those shows are looking for and tailor your portfolio to the specific studio where you want to get in, not just the job, but it's also the studio. Like the more you can refine your work to please this one specific entity, the more likely you'll be listened to.
And then you find that a lot in genres. Like if somebody came in with a DC or Marvel show type portfolio and they're applying to BoJack and Tucker and Birdie, I'd be like, this is really cool. I don't know how it applies to this job, but it's really cool. Good luck.
But Michael, that was really interesting. So if you are looking for someone who can do all those different stuff, like how would you recommend like catering their portfolio or like organizing their work?
But you're also not wrong. I think it is the difference between features and TV, because they can offer you a 2-year gig and you're just storyboarding all the way through. But I had to constantly compete with all these bento box shows and titmouse shows, and so I would be like, hey, I got a year's worth of work over here for you. And yeah, I guess how we would look at their resume, and I think it was more like the people who were working in TV might have multiple disciplines. Like, it's anybody who was a filmmaker who was making their own shorts had probably dabbled in After Effects a little bit. And if they had just the base level of After Effects, we had a large compositing team, or as I called it on BoJack, our hair and makeup team. They kind of took our 2D animation and made it look pretty. And if they kind of like dabbled in After Effects, if it was on their resume, I'd be like, so you're interested in storyboarding. Would you also like to talk about compositing? So yeah, they honestly wouldn't always come in for that, because we'd only be advertising for one job. But it's kind of in that software, you on your resume, like, I don't know if you would put it, Donna, but like, do you still put your software on your resume? Probably not, right?
Probably just Photoshop and that's it.
Photoshop, yeah, but a lot of people are applying, a lot of the younger people would still put like all the softwares they use, and we would often look at the softwares before we look at the colleges they went to. You know what I mean? Like, weirdly, and then we knew about the softwares, because I know I would put software on my resume and I would lie.
Dangerous.
Especially if
so
it's
useful. That's
and
really
if it's a
good.
software you could learn by the time they hire you, that lie could be okay.
Yeah. If I opened it once, if I was trying to click on Photoshop and I accidentally opened Illustrator, then I think that counts as me using Illustrator.
Totally. I mean, Mike, the one thing that you are sort of touching upon too is that the series pickups are so short these days that you're not in production very long for any one of the parts of the pipeline.
Yeah, that is true. If you're working, there's an arms race going on right now. So if you work at Disney TV and then Netflix is trying to compete with Disney TV, at Netflix TV, they're actively trying to hold on to people. They have a whole department, a recruiting department, whose job is to kind of reshuffle you around on shows. But yeah, you do hop around a lot. Yeah, if you're working on these TV shows, and the stints are short, but hopefully, the more and more known you get, like the more you tie those together.
I have a database of what I know writers, like full of writers that are like, I know exactly when they're rolling off of what show, and I'm going to call them like a month or two before I know they're rolling off. It's just like that.
I was always very like, I would follow shows and what shows were coming and going like it was sports, because I was like constantly keeping an eye out. Like, I know Mike Maloney is over on this Mau Mau show and at Titmouse, and that show just went down, so Mike Maloney is available. And then I'm like,
totally.
Yeah, you gotta have to, when you kind of reach the management level, it's like a bunch of racehorses out there.
True.
But people too, they're also people, and
And
totally people too.
as not a final thought, but as a closing thought, maybe on what Donna and Mike are discussing, which is really fascinating. I think it's probably even useful to Mike, if someone comes in even into his orbit and has a first focus or a main thing they're applying for, or their top skill, and then if they have other things that he can use, that's a great value for him. And again, surely, you know, with the feature pipeline does seem to be the most focus oriented, like where you should be specializing in something. And then another version of the what we call generalists are not just for the TV kind of scrappy model like Mike is describing, but also for like a small studio that might be juggling some web shorts and some music videos and some commercials and some you know, studio IP things or whatever, where they want you to storyboard and then maybe direct it to, and then animate the next thing or write the next project, or, you know, they need people like that in those chairs that they can keep feeding in different ways. So and if that's more you, then I think your focus should probably be applying to those smaller studios, you know, where it's more that boutique style.
Yeah, TV loves those generalists, like you're saying, people who could do everything and continue to work up the ladder.
Definitely. And I also want to reinforce something Donna said about, you know, it sounds like she was saying like, help them connect the dots when you apply, you know, like make it easy for them to see that you do storyboards and customize your approach. Because if it's a storyboard job you're applying to, that should be what you have and how you describe yourself. And if you've got all those other things, like she said, I also have a design portfolio, that's bonus, but that shouldn't be in the mix as equal value. They shouldn't be two neon signs competing in, you know, when you're looking in the feature world.
Yeah.
Cool. And then I got another question. How do you all stay motivated and inspired? Does anyone want to take a stab at that?
Hunger.
Hunger is good.
The hunger of you and your children. Your little bear cubs.
Oh, me wee bairn.
But Joanna, I love that word hunger, and I've actually thought of that even now, like, and then even before being a dad, the idea of staying hungry. I run a little boutique animation studio within Disney. We do social media shorts. I worked with Joanna on one a while back. She did a beautiful job. And with the work that my team is doing, we're doing like 30 to 35 shorts at any given time. And I have 5 producers, 2 artists. And so we're constantly busy and everyone's working a full packed, very tight day, you know, on juggling multiple projects, my whole team. So in October 2019, it was right after I came back from Pixelotl, where I had breakfast with Donna and almost met Mike. I went to my team and I said, hey, we're about to finish a series for Lucasfilm. We should be pitching them our own ideas. Like we just did 40 episodes to order for them. How about let's do our own development? And they all said, oh, can you ask us in 3 months? We're really busy. That's what like my whole team said. And I said, no, we have to be hungry. We gotta do this, because we should be approaching them now while we're busy. This is when we do these things. Like we gotta develop, we have to, let's set a time. I'll manage it, it'll be really efficient. And then within a month, well, we met with Lucasfilm, we did a strategic, like, hey, what do you need? We then grouped on our own and did 2 rounds of brainstorming. And then I divided up my team into different little two-person teams, little pods. And then we made 6 slides. We pitched Lucasfilm in a month later. And then by the summer, so the whole winter went by, the pandemic was underway. By July, Lucasfilm wrote me an email. Hey, remember that show you pitched in November? Give us a budget, we want to do it. So we got to make our own original thing, because it wasn't comfortable to do it in October, November, but we were sure happy to have it in the summer, and we're still delivering the show, and it's ending in May, and they want more. And you know, you gotta, that hunger shouldn't just be when you're right out of school. You gotta find a way to stay hungry and keep it interesting and keep that energy to it. Because I don't think that has to be about age, you know, or how fit you are.
And
I really think it's, oh, sorry, go ahead, Mike.
And that's how David created Baby Yoda.
That is
Yes,
right.
That's true. Not true.
It's, to me, it's like, along with what you were saying, Dave, is like that, it's like you're always learning. Like if you're someone who just loves to learn and always feels like you can be doing better work and be, you know, just improve how you're doing it, what you're doing, what it looks like, that, I mean, I find that personally to be a very big driver, that it is, you're never done. You're never done learning. You're never done improving. You're never done challenging yourself. And then what I love, Dave, about your story is this idea of momentum, that it is all about momentum, like trying to create a it's like being, having that conversation with Lucasfilms and just like turning something around pretty quickly. And they see that you guys have drive and momentum and you're capitalizing and you're taking that conversation and bringing back all this information and creative thoughts and energy. I mean, all that is intoxicating, frankly. Like what kills creativity is, and what kills sort of like a buyer or an employer's interest is just that when it falls, like that final, like when there's a lack of energy, I think is hard, especially now. I feel like now there's just like there's so much content out there. There's so many people that are buying and desperate to like be distinguish themselves from other people and other platforms. Like there's so much competition, and it's really people are hungry. The buyers are hungry too, is what I think. I hope.
See, we got this hunger word is working out for us. Hunger, hungry. Let's keep it going. Another question came in. If you're working in a studio, let's say on a project like for Mike on a show, how do you work if you're working in one area like boards or something, and how do you get some experience working in character design or some other area? Like how does one try to make that happen?
If you're working on a show and it's less the department you're working in and more just that you're known to be someone who's turning out quality work, hitting deadlines, and can be trusted. And then I remember with this young lady, Elizabeth McMahill, she was our first prop supervisor, and she was just kicking so much butt in her files. I love clean files. Her files, you could eat off these files. And when she was approaching the end of her run, when props were coming to an end, I was just like, I want to be in the Elizabeth McMahill business. What do you want to do next? Like, I just need to keep you working, because once you like have somebody and you're like, I have discovered this amazing little masterpiece of an artist here. Like, I don't want to, I greedily don't want to share them. I don't want to lose them. And so she was like, well, I've always been interested in being an After Effects artist. And I was like, you're an After Effects artist. And there was some, and then from my point of view as a supervisor, there was some time that I had to spend, not me personally, but I know there would be time that had to be spent training her, but it's great time. Like when you know you have somebody who's in it to win it, like the training time is like whatever, because you know you're training somebody who's gonna just bang out this amazing stuff. Yeah, and then she went on, there's like two types of After Effects people, just the people who are like ingesting the animation and marrying it to the backgrounds and putting it back out, and then the looks person who comes up with the whole lighting look and everything. And yeah, she became one of our looks people. She was just so great at it. And she ended up working on every position to the earlier like she started as a prop designer, went into After Effects. She was a storyboarder. I think she was a character designer. She was a BG designer. She ended up doing it all. And because we were just like, yeah, do whatever you want, just work here. Yeah, you just get into, at a certain point, you just get into business with people. Like you're like,
that's awesome.
Elizabeth McMahill just works here. Like, what is she doing right now? I don't know. She just works here. Whatever she's doing, I know that it's being done correctly. Like, she could just do whatever she wants. And then you do get so much trust where like she could have just done whatever she wanted, and we would have been. She just worked for the show. And just in general.
Joanna?
And also to sort of establish yourself as someone who can do a million things, I do recommend for students to look at smaller studios, which often get overlooked because people have really big eyes for Disney, Warner Brothers. But I think I got the perfect education at this really small studio that was willing to take a chance on somebody inexperienced just to see like how much good stuff they could get out of them. So definitely do research and don't overlook the little guy.
And then it is important to remember that once you kind of like, I worked for BoJack for the little guy for a long time, and then you kind of feel like you're in TV and you can't make it into feature. But if you have a resume, all you have to do is apply to Disney, and then they'll employ you there. You kind of feel like, oh, this is what I am, and like you can work, like Joanna's saying, like work at these small places, but that doesn't mean you have to work at those small places forever. You could bounce back and forth. Like, I don't think Disney cares. Like, it's also, you will meet people, and you'll just kind of meet people, and they'll go over to Disney, and then you'll just follow them over to Disney, and then you'll bounce back to TV and stuff. You can bounce back and forth. It doesn't happen a lot for some reason, but there's no reason.
Yeah, I agree with what you said. It's important because you get into that mindset. It was like, wow, I got a job. I guess I'm doing this forever. So when people get that first job, so it goes back to staying hungry. Like, you did great, got your first job, but look to what's next. Have confidence in yourself to spread your wings.
Yeah,
Definitely. I had another example of it when I was at Blue's Clues. So I came in as a storyboard artist because that's what they needed at the time, and it was one of the skills I had. But 2 years of that, I kind of felt like I was on a treadmill. Like, oh yeah, I kind of get what the show is. It's very flat. I'm not really going to learn much more. Like, I'm just kind of gonna the new script is the new script. It felt like that. And I was finishing that indie film I told you about that I was working on that took 2 years. So I finished that indie film, and then I showed it once to Dave Palmer, who's the supervising director of animation at Blue's Clues, and he looked at it and he said, how come you're not animating for me on this show? Like, why are you in storyboard? And I said, well, that's where the opening was when I came in. And he said, do you want to switch? Do you want to transition? So he basically opened that door. And then within a year, I was directing under him when they doubled production. But it was all based on showing it outside of the job. In my case, that I was home animating, even though I was there storyboarding. So, he saw me as something else. I could do something else. Let's grab another question. About what tools we're using, what animation software. I think we could hit this one quick. It's probably Toon Boom and Adobe Animate, After Effects, Maya. Am I missing any?
TV Paint.
Photoshop, TV Paint. Okay. I think we might have got it.
Blender?
Blender, sure.
Ah.
Yeah.
Flash for life.
Yeah, now Adobe Animator.
It will never be Animate. It's Flash.
Oh yeah, that's it. Adobe Animate.
Generic. I don't know what we're talking about if we say Animate.
It's true. In the book, I usually had to say both because I still want to say Flash.
Flash is like the best thing to storyboard in if you're interested in your own timing. But Storyboard Pro, but what Adobe doesn't send out any salespeople to animation studios. But what is it called? Storyboard Pro. They constantly send out big sales forces, and they have a bunch of ads in like Animation Magazine, which the producers are all wooed by. Meanwhile, the producers don't have to draw. They're like, somebody from Storyboard Pro takes them out to lunch, and then all of a sudden they're like,
Thank you.
They're ready to put a ring on it.
Thank you for calling out Toon Boom, because that's why I'm like, TV Paint. There's more than one. You can do frame by frame in other programs.
What do they use in features, Donna, for as a story artist? What are you using?
So they have their own proprietary softwares. So at Disney, they used for storyboarding, they used Photoshop. And they have a pitching program called, oh my gosh, Raconteur. And I know up at Pixar, they also have their own pitching software as well. At Sony, they're using Flix. So these are all programs that probably can't be bought like outside of the studios, I think for now, hopefully. But mostly I just use Photoshop, or I know some people use TV Paint and Storyboard Pro.
Awesome. Okay, I'm gonna pluck another question here. Let's see. Oh, now let's talk a little on social media. I know Joanna was wanting to. How can I get more views and traffic on social media like Twitter and Instagram, and also on LinkedIn on a professional level? This person wants more eyeballs. What are your recommendations, panel?
Don't we all? That's why I say quantity over quality. Although quality is still important, you know, just everybody's scrolling. So the more stuff you have out there, the more chance somebody has to land on something that you've done. So you know, put more stuff out there, get more engaged in comments. You know, have something meaningful to say so that the original poster will want to respond to you and start a conversation. And again, don't be shy to reach out to people. Every animation hero I've ever had, I was terrified to approach, but once a conversation gets started, they're all so nice and they're so eager to share stories. I mean, not 100% across the board, but most, like, you compared to other parts of the entertainment industry, animation is like a love-in. It's everyone is so you have to be crazy about this work in order to survive in it. So that craziness wants to be shared. So don't be shy, and quantity and engagement.
Awesome. Yeah, build up a body of work. It's really not about that precious one thing you drew perfectly and posted, and then 3 years went by. It's really like making a library, an archive of stuff.
Yeah, Joanna.
That's what a brand is.
You put up a lot of those process things, like you show the steps of your animation, right?
I just, whatever I have that it's finished by the end of the day, that I'm like, maybe, I don't know, I'll just put it out there. And it's just, there's still some stuff that for some reason I don't feel comfortable sharing. Like, I worked really hard on a design for my daughter's birthday cake and I thought I would share it to everybody, but for some reason I'm like, I don't want to share it, which is weird of me because I like to share everything. But people are interested in process as well. People want to know how crappy your drawings can be, so they feel better about their crappy drawings. You never know what's going to connect with people, and that's why, like, I always say, as long as it's in good taste, in good spirit, because some people draw things, like I've been sent some stuff that I'm like, well, that's nice for you, but maybe not show that to, think about it. But most of the time, it's really cool to share something that there's something about it that sparks joy in you that perhaps will spark joy in others. I totally stole that phrase. I'm sorry. Marie Kondo, sorry.
That's great. Awesome. I want to make sure I ask the panel, because I feel like I don't want to stretch everybody's patience, you know, into past 2 hours. So I feel like we could start wrapping up. And I want to make sure to get to ask this question and have all the panel answer. If you could go back in time, you know, to the start of your career, what advice would you give yourself?
I would say your dreams are allowed to change, and don't get too focused on one goal, because then you'll just drive yourself insane and miserable. Allow yourself to branch out.
Leave some room, yeah, to have different experiences and come to different conclusions.
I ran my own little company for like 12 years. For a little while, it was sort of my bridge between doing live action and doing animation. And during that time, you know, the phone would ring and I would take the job and I would do the job. It was like often directing live action shorts or interstitials or little promos. And then, like, I wouldn't know what my next job is for like 5 days. And then the phone would ring again and I would do that job. And I think I spent, and it was fine, but I wasn't driving. And I really regret that. I really regret that I didn't say, you know, I can actually be more ambitious. I should be in those rooms. I can get in those rooms, and because I know that when I get in those rooms, I have something to say. And I really wish I'd pushed myself more, as opposed to being more of a passive, sort of letting my career happen to me. I wish I had driven more.
Thanks, Koyalee. That's great.
That's such good advice. Oh my gosh. Like, I feel like that could totally apply to me too, like what everyone's been saying. If there's something that I could tell my younger self is don't compare yourself to others. Like, It's just so easy to see like other people like either around your age, or if they're going off at a better art animation school, or if they're at a better job than you. It's just so easy to put yourself in that like hole where you're just constantly just comparing yourself, and then that makes you doubt yourself, like, oh, am I really just, I just feel like I'm falling behind. Just stop doing that. Like I wish I could just like, I wish I just relieve myself of that and just be free to just explore my creativity, just explore the things that I like, and just really feel free to invest myself in those things. Because, you know, sometimes I felt like I had to like constantly be studying or constantly being like drawing all the time. And like, even though that's great, like, I think I just felt guilty to be like playing video games or just like going out somewhere or traveling. Like, I feel like I kind of robbed myself of that a lot. And, you know, but with all those experiences, that's all going to help you like in your job too, or to help you in your stories or whatever creative thing that you do in the future. So yeah, just feel free in the moment. Like, don't worry about like what others are doing. Just focus on yourself and just, you know, invest in yourself. Like, it's totally fine to do that.
Thank you, Donna. That's very smart.
Yeah, and I guess if I had a time machine, I mean, the standard answer is that I'd go back in time and kill Hitler, but I'm going to update that and say I go back in time and maybe kill Trump. Is it too soon to? No, I wouldn't do that. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. That's not real. That's not real.
That's okay. The gallery can edit that out if they want to. It's their prerogative. But do you have some, is there anything else you want to say, Mike?
I was only thinking of that joke.
That's
That's
perfect.
okay. I'll take a stab at the answer, and then if you have another one, Mike, I'll leave some room. But for me, it was really like forgetting, or actually not realizing that I might have something to say, that I might have something to express, like in the independent films I was making, instead of making them like audition pieces to try to get a pilot on Cartoon Network, or like I was at one point I started aiming for edgy things and things that I thought would be funny to other people. And then when I finally did something for me, it broke through, and I made this little 10-day film called Good Morning. You could find on YouTube under Robert M. Shard. He's the composer who wrote the song. But I animated this song for 10 days, and my mother had just died, and it was like a very happy song about a parent and a child. And it was like therapy. And I was expressing grief, you know, through making this little project. And when I played it for people, it touched them. And like people, you know, it broke through. Nick Jr. started showing it 3 mornings a week. It got into festivals around the world. It's still part of apps that pay me a royalty to screen it, you know, for educational purposes. It really opened a lot of doors, and it led me down a new path of expressing things that I didn't know I even would want to before that, because I was chasing what was commercial or what was trendy. So if I could have had that lesson earlier, it would have really helped me. Any other, go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, thanks for giving me time to think about it. I've
Sure.
come up with a better answer. If I had a time machine, I think I would go back in time and I would get little dinosaurs like Archaeopteryxes and like little ones, and then I bring them back and quit animation and sell those dinosaurs as little pets. Like, who wouldn't want a little Archaeopteryx as like a pet, you know, a little pet Archaeopteryx?
Well, you can even put them together in a zoo type place on an island somewhere and maybe charge admission. What could go wrong?
I like it. You want to go in business? You could design the logo. What do you think it would look like?
Oh, I'm thinking yellow, red skeleton. I don't know. It's crazy talk.
All right. I like what you're saying.
It writes itself, people. Wonderful. And then where can people find you? Because this is a fun introduction to a lot of you, I'm sure, from our audience. So what's a good place for them to find you and just see more of what you've done or follow you? So we'll start with Joanna.
I am on Twitter, Facebook, What are other places that are Instagram? I usually go by my name, Joanna Davidovich, or Joe the Zet. I'm still getting back to life with answering messages and emails. So, but I'm pretty good about answering everything. So don't be offended if I don't answer immediately, but I will. And I do also have like the YouTube channel. Yes, you mentioned that. And I'm also on YouTube. That's the major thing. I'm on YouTube, and just Joanna Davidovich, and I'll pop up.
Wonderful. Thank you. Koyalee?
When you have a name like Koyalee and you spend your whole childhood never finding rainbow stickers with your name on them or bicycle license plates, you squat on Koyalee at pretty much everything. So I'm Koyalee at Twitter, Koyalee on Instagram. I will say that I don't tweet very often, but I look at Twitter a lot. So I would, I'm happy to, I have like 4 followers, you guys. Like I just am not that active, but I do answer DMs on Twitter. So Instagram, my Instagram is private, which maybe I feel old, like an old person, that's the case, but no one wants to see pictures of the cookies I make and my kids, right? Like, and my dog, no. Anyway, so that's it. Twitter's the best.
Awesome. Donna?
I was gonna say, I want to see your cookies and your doggies. Like, yes, I love dogs.
Well, you two can hook that up later.
Yeah, we'll follow them.
Yeah.
DM.
Yes. I have an Instagram. It's at dlee08. I, for some reason, chose that basic name, but that was when Instagram first popped out. I was like, yes, I'm like dlee number 8. So I have Instagram, and then I have Twitter. So the username for that is Birdie Hoodie, like a birdie and then like a hoodie. So yeah, those are the 2 social platforms that I usually hang around in, and yeah, come say hello.
That's awesome. And Mr. Mike?
You can find me on Instagram at stuffed animals with 3 F's. It's stuffed with 1 extra F. And
nice. And that's also the name of your Nick Digital short.
No, that was Low Tide Cartoons, but yeah, they saw I used to draw like panel cartoons called Stuffed Animals, and those are way buried down at the bottom of the Instagram profile.
Got it. Cool. And then if you want to find me outside of the book, I'm at Dave the Dad Jokes, all one word, on Instagram, and it's just a place where I post 3 usually single panel cartoons about my family, about having a 4-year-old, and just the little bubble of my wife and our daughter and our cat.
I love those comics, Dave. I love them so much.
They're so good.
Oh, thank you.
So
that's inspired by life.
You're leaning in on the dad jokes thing. To me, that's like when somebody's like, "Oh, that's a dad joke, Mike." I'm like, I did stand up for 15 years. I write comedy for television. Don't dad joke me. How dare you?
Well, I think the funny thing about my dad jokes is it's really a misnomer, because they're not so much like groaner puns, although I love that too. They're more just like little moments in time, from being a parent or dealing with, life. So they're not actually groaners necessarily, but they're just little snapshots of dad life right now for me. And it's a way I'm tricking myself into freezing time and trying to remember all these things that I may not remember if I don't do it. Yeah. So it's art as life. Since we've done our how they can follow us, I just want to thank Gallery Nucleus and Ben and Denise again, for doing this. And I know there'll be a book signing they'll give you more details about. If you bought the book, which I guess assume you have if you're on this link. And they've been an absolute pleasure, and I can't wait to visit the gallery for the signing and just as a attendee after that, and just plug into their community that they're building. So, and I want to thank this panel. So can we all just thank them for being amazing? Woo! Thanks, Joanna. Thanks, Koyalee. Thanks, Donna. Thanks, Mike.